Thank you for joining us on Bring It In. This is Dana Smith, live from her living room in Oakland.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are a senior science writer at Elemental, which is part of Medium. Is that right?
That's true. Yep.
And of course, David Thorpe's here. And thank you so much for joining us, because I feel like we're in this thing where there's, like, every time I open social media, there's 10,000 potentially interesting insights, and every one of them I'm like, how likely is this one to be true? And I'm a little stressed out about that. And you actually have degrees in this kind of stuff and use science and can help us assess. So thank you for that.
I'll do my best.
So your most recent article was about the various treatments that are being discussed for coronavirus. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So obviously, chloroquine has been in the news a lot with Trump kind of coming down hard, saying that it was the one. So we wanted to look at that. Remdesivir is another drug that's being looked at for a clinical trial. And then there's another one that has a combination of 2 HIV drugs that are being looked at. And so basically there's just a lot of long drug names that no one really knows what they mean. And so we just kind of wanted to pull everything together and look at what are the clinical trials actually saying, who's doing what. And last week, the WHO also announced they're going to have like a huge multi-thousand international study that they're launching that's also looking at these 3 drug combinations specifically. So we just kind of wanted to give an overview of that. Basically, there is some preliminary analysis for all 3 of these drugs, the chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, and then the HIV combination, which is Loroquine and ritonavir, I want to say. Don't let me do that, sorry.
This is a basketball show, so we're not going to question you on that.
I also apologize if there's a little noise outside my window currently. This is, live from the living room. So basically, the chloroquine studies have come out.
What are they doing?
I told you they're really loud garbage trucks that come right at 8 a.m.
We don't hear the
play
trucks,
the drums.
The banging. We don't hear the trucks, just the banging.
Yeah.
The cans.
Oh yeah, that's the bang with the garbage cans. Yeah. Sorry guys.
Yeah.
This is professionalism 101 here.
I was literally like, we're not going to hear that. Don't worry. Like, you were right.
You're going to hear it, yeah. Oh, sorry, buddy. So basically, all right, so remdesivir is ongoing. It was the first trial that the NIH launched through NIAID. It's at a bunch of different sites in the US. It's medium successful so far. So they gave it on a compassionate use basis to some of the most severe cases in Seattle, and it maybe helped and maybe didn't. But it was not a knock out of the park. It was not a home run. It's still like maybe has a little bit of an effect. It's an antiviral drug that's supposed to stop the virus from replicating. So hopefully it just kind of decreases the amount of virus system, and so your immune system can kick it out on its own. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, there was these 2 papers that came out mostly from a French researcher who was saying, oh my gosh, this is the be all end all. Look how great this is. It's amazing. The catch is that he excluded everyone who had to go to the ICU, even if they were on the drug. So normally you would include those people.
He was quoted saying he doesn't believe in randomized control studies.
Right. This is not the most reliable study, and this is what everyone got really excited about, and it's just frankly not very good science. There's other studies that are looking at it. University of Minnesota just launched a clinical trial looking at it as a prophylaxis. So if you come into contact with someone who you know is exposed, or you know has the virus, you've been exposed, you can take chloroquine beforehand, and maybe that will prevent you from getting sick. Again, this is part of a clinical trial. Don't do this on your own. We don't know if it's effective yet. But there are reasons to believe it might be. But the French the French study that they put out is not very good science and not really something to bank on. And then the HIV drug combination, there was a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that essentially showed no real benefit. So it's still included in the WHO trial, but people aren't super enthusiastic about it. A caveat with a lot of these is that they're being given to patients who are very, very sick, who are already, in the hospital for 2 weeks and are kind of in a late stage of the disease. And there is some thinking now that by that point, it's not really the virus that's causing the problem, it's your own immune system. And so giving you an antiviral drug at that point isn't maybe going to do a whole lot, because you have the cytokine storm, you have your own inflammatory molecules just kind of wreaking havoc in your lungs. So it would actually be most beneficial to give those drugs earlier on, when you have kind of a, fighting chance of fighting off the virus on its own.
I mean, I'm super confident with this, but just in case anybody else is confused, could you just define cytokine storm?
Yes. So cytokines are inflammatory molecules that your immune system puts out. They're like, they go and attack the virus. So normally you want them. Cytokines are just part of the immune system. They're good. Inflammation is kind of a byproduct of them. But when there's too many of them, it goes haywire. So that's what's causing death in a lot of these cases, is that it just kind of causes tons of inflammation in the lungs. The lungs start leaking, and that's how you get pretty bad pneumonia. There's some evidence that it's also causing heart damage. It can cause sepsis, where you just have total organ failure and shutdown. So mostly what people are dying from is kind of their own body freaking out and kind of turning on itself. It's not the virus actually causing that much damage.
And David has a bunch of good kind of basketball and exercise related questions, but before I hand it over to him, have you looked into this convalescent plasma thing that we're kind of excited about on this show?
Yeah, it's definitely promising. They've done it with Ebola. They did it with H1N1. I think they did it with MERS. It goes back a long time in terms of essentially using the plasma from someone who's, already been sick and recovered. And then the idea is that your immune system also creates these antibodies that are virus specific. And so when you first get sick, you have this kind of initial wave of an immune response that's kind of, it's the same for any virus. It's called your innate immune response. And then as your body gets used to the virus being in your system, you create these viral specific antibodies that just go and attach and can destroy that virus specifically. And that's also how you have immunity in case you get sick again. So your body already knows the virus. It can go and attack it much more quickly. And that's how a lot of vaccines work also. So the idea is that if you take the antibodies from someone who's already had the virus and recovered, put them to someone who's sick, maybe those antibodies can then go and destroy the virus much more quickly, while your own body is trying to create your own antibodies and kind of ramp it up. So it is promising. It's not super efficient, which is why it's not, we obviously want a drug treatment. It's really hard to know that the patients are, have the right antibodies, that you have to also have a blood type match. It can just be a lot harder to track down the people who kind of qualify for this. And then you've got to do essentially a blood transfusion. So definitely we want a drug, but in the meantime, when we have no drug and no vaccine, it really is promising. So they're starting to ramp it up in New York. And they had an initial study in China where they gave antibody therapy to 5 different patients. And it still took about 2 weeks for them to recover, but all of them did actually recover and go home. And they had all been, on ventilators and were very, very ill at that point. So it suggests that they don't know for sure that it was the antibodies that worked, but all the patients did recover. So it's a promising start.
Well, and one of the risks with the new experimental thing is that they might die from some other complication of it that we hadn't foreseen, right? And that didn't happen, I guess.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Always a risk when you're, putting anything
David, let me
new
turn it over
in
to
the
you.
body.
Right.
But yeah, so far, it seemed pretty safe. Again, it's a super old therapy. So I think they can do the best they can to kind of mitigate the risk. And yeah, they're ramping it up in New York, and I think Baltimore is to follow. So fingers crossed that it works.
Okay. David, you want to ask some basketball questions?
Yeah. So Dana, let's just imagine there is an infected player in a gym. Doesn't matter age, sex, whatever. He's in a gym, and he's shooting baskets by himself with his ball. When he shoots for an hour, when he leaves, and the next person comes in with his own basketball. Okay, that's my first question. His own basketball. What is the likelihood that second player can get infected? Whether the virus is still in the air, how long might he have to wait before he should go in? And can the virus have been transferred from the player to his ball, and then it hits the rim and the net and the backboard? So this because right now the NBA is shut, every gym in the world is shut down. And I'm certain for at least professional college teams, if they knew that the virus can't be transferred that way, at least some guys would start working out on their own. So yeah, what's your thoughts on how that it can be transferred that way?
I mean, the airborne question is the $1 million question right now. So what we've always heard from the experts, and I don't mean to, I'm not questioning them at all, but basically the virus is transmitted when you cough or sneeze, but it's also just if you're talking or you're exhaling. And if you're working out, you're going to be exhaling more and have bigger breaths. So basically, whenever we exhale, we have, little moisture droplets and little bits of mucus that come out. And the virus is stuck inside these little water droplets. And these are tiny. You can't feel them. It's not, they're microscopic. And the logic is that they are big enough that they are heavy enough in the air that they fall down to the floor pretty quickly. What I've heard is that they fall within seconds to minutes. So minutes is a little bit longer if you're walking through, but certainly if someone had been in the gym and someone comes in, half an hour later, there should not be any more droplets kind of just like floating around in the air. For comparison, measles can stay airborne for about 3 hours. So that's why it's so incredibly infectious, is that someone can be in the room, breathe out, leave, someone else can come in and can still get infected, a couple hours later. We do not think that's the case for coronavirus. The droplets or the viral particles are large enough that they should weigh the droplets down and fall down to the ground. There's a couple of caveats. This is one area where the weather and like the seasonality of a virus plays in. When it's colder and drier, the virus can actually kind of shrivel up a little bit. It gets a little bit smaller, so it gets a little bit lighter, which means it can stay floating around for a little bit longer. Right. During hot and humid summers, there's more water in the air, the droplets get a little bit bigger, and so they fall to the ground faster. That's one kind of theory about why there's seasonality of viruses. It should probably play out for this, although, don't count on this going away in the summer just because we don't know enough about it yet. So getting back to your question, I think if you waited an hour and, he's the only guy in the gym, he's playing with his own ball, I don't think that the virus would still be floating in the air. And I think the likelihood of hand to ball to rim to ball back to hand is pretty low. The virus kind of loses particles, fewer virus particles survive, the more transfer of surfaces it goes to. But at this point, I mean, I can never say that your risk is zero. So it might be something that we just don't want to risk at this point.
Right.
That's the best I got.
And so you talked about it dropping to the ground. Just to follow up on that, because I live in Florida and it's already very hot and humid here. Can you get it if it goes to the ground? It doesn't die immediately on the ground, does it?
No. We know a little bit about the surfaces that it survives on. There was a really great paper that showed, so one thing, it can survive in this kind of aerosol cloud for 3 hours on its own. So if the virus was floating around in the air and you walk through it, there can still be viral particles in that air for 3 hours. That doesn't mean that the virus stays in the air for 3 hours, but if it did, it could survive that long. It survives on copper for 4 hours, cardboard for 24, and then plastics and other metal for up to 3 days. I don't know about wood or concrete. They didn't do those tests, but I would imagine it would be kind of on the more like 2 to 3 day range just because it's a harder surface. Mm-hmm. So it's not dying immediately. It is still kind of living on the ground. Okay.
Henry?
And then could it get on the ball from the ground?
It's like dribbling.
That's a good question. Yeah. Hypothetically, it could. Again, it loses the number of particles that are there do die off from every surface transfer. This is one reason that people are saying like you don't actually need to wash your groceries, or like if you get food delivery, you don't actually need to wash every single packaging, because the amount of virus that travels again from hand to surface to surface to surface to your hand it declines every single time. But I don't think that you can ever say the risk is zero at that point. So this is where things like hand washing, if you're playing basketball, fine, it's not, traveling through your skin from your hands. It would have to be from you then touching your face.
That's the step you can stop, right?
Yeah.
That's the one you can manage is, can you really go and shoot around for an hour and not touch your face.
Right. Not wipe your eyes. Right.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, Dana, is as it relates to professional basketball, until they can test someone before they walk in the gym every day, and I know that day isn't anywhere close that I could see anyway. You would know better than I. It's a risk the league's not going to take. No league's going to take that risk until you can test them as they walk in the facility every day.
Yeah. I mean, if you are an NBA player and you have your own gym at home, I would say that's probably your best bet. Knock yourself out. But I can't imagine that they're going to be opening up public gyms anytime soon. Because people can be contagious before they're symptomatic. Right. It looks like some people can be contagious even if they're entirely asymptomatic. It's something that we're seeing more and more, is that, some people might just be carriers and never actually know that they're sick. And yet they can still be, shedding viral particles through their breath and through their cough and everything.
Do we know anything about false negative tests? So in other words, someone tests negative, but turns out they were positive?
Yeah, I don't know the percentages across the top of my head. I know the tests are not perfect though. So there is always a risk. The tests are the best that we have right now, and they're pretty good, but they're not 100% flawless.
Ooh, speaking of 100% flawless, this is my perfect record of forgetting to tell people where to ask a question every time we do the show. I mean to do it at the top, and I promise Judy every time I'm going to do it, and I just blow it every day. So now I'll do it now. If you want to ask a question, regular viewers will know. Click the little chat button. You can just type it in there, and I'll read it, or David will read it. Or if you'd like to ask the question yourself on video, write the word video in all caps, like our hero Gerard does, and then we'll have him on or you on, and you can ask your question. Okay, in these sort of insane questions that we all have in these times, I was wondering about playing catch, right? So I have children who are bouncing off the walls, and they have friends who are within blocks of here, and I don't even know if they want to play catch, but I was like, could they? Could you have a friend come stay outside our yard and just like throw the ball?
Again, I think one thing with kids is it's pretty risky. Like you can't, I don't know how old your kids are, but like kids.
Oh, they're idiots. No, they'll definitely touch their face.
They will wipe their hands all over their face. They're going to be picking their nose. They're going to be rubbing their eyes. Like I would not trust them to not touch their face. And those viral particles can be on the ball if the other kid is sick. And then they will definitely touch their face. And then, they could potentially be infected. So I think that's just a risk that you don't want to take. I was going to say tennis can be a good bet because you're just holding a racket, but I guess you are still kind of like throwing the ball up in the air. There is like some touching of the tennis ball, when you serve and things like that.
What if you wore gloves in any of those sports? What if you had gloves on?
Still touch your face,
You still, that comes, you still touch your face with the gloves. You touch the ball with the gloves, and then unless you immediately take off the gloves, touch your face, put on a new pair of gloves, it would get a little inefficient. And honestly, I think the other thing, one reason why experts are saying we shouldn't be wearing gloves and face masks around is because we're not competent enough to put them on or off without infecting ourselves.
Yeah, by that.
Like we're not trained in glove and mask use. So if you
new habits on your face.
Yeah. We're just an embarrassing species. We're just
totally incompetent. We're totally
dogs would be just fine. We are idiots.
Well, I was thinking about this. I'm like, maybe you know the answer to this thing, but I was like, there's no way the scientifically perfect amount of time to wash your hands is the happy birthday song. They were in the meeting and they were like, just go with happy birthday. It's all they can handle.
What's wrong with counting to 20? I don't understand what the problem is. I never understood that.
Either. It would annoy me way more to have happy birthday stuck in my head all the time. Just count to 20.
Right. It'd be really inventive and do it in another language.
Yeah.
Do it in French or Italian or Hebrew or something. That might be more fun.
Yeah, I've not. Actually, I like your tennis idea. What about tennis with, like, if you had 15 balls, right? So it's just a long time. As soon as one goes out of play, just don't touch it, right? Like,
people can pick it up with their racket. The really good players just pick it up with their racket. You just won't be able to serve. Then it's right.
It's all rally.
I guess you could be if you were really slick, you could, pick it up with the racket, bounce it on your racket, and then hit it. You wouldn't get the full serve in, but I'm still never going to say do this because your risk is not zero. But it's maybe, I don't know.
Kind of fun.
You just want to get a ball machine, and just hit it and have the ball machine serve to you. But then of course you've got to set up the ball machine. Your gross hands are all over it. So I don't know.
By the time you have your own place to do this and your own ball machine, you probably have like a medical staff and like your own equipment for, like whatever, you're fine. You're already
Right.
fine.
All the NBA players got tested immediately. So I think they've got the hookup. They'll be fine.
No, we've been hearing like there's some, so one of David's orchestrating points of the last week has been like, most players don't have their own courts and gyms and things. Like most of them are in condos and they're jogging up and down the hallway, and it's like not as glamorous as you'd think. Like
interesting.
And they're so recognizable. They have to be careful going out to like the nearby park to go shoot, because the NBA doesn't want that attention. So they can get up at 7 a.m, go shoot. Someone will recognize them if they're there, and then news gets out on Twitter, and then the NBA gets mad. So they're afraid to go out, even to go anywhere, much less go, shoot baskets.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. They're just like the rest of us.
They're exactly, which really pisses them off. It's great to be an NBA player, except for during a pandemic. As I've told many of them, I got no sympathy at all for you.
There's nothing worse than rejoining the pack, right?
They worked so hard, and luckily because their parents, they got really tall, which is a huge benefit in this sport. Yeah. And now they're just as dumb as the rest of the species. They just are stuck with not being able to do anything. All right, Henry, I thought you had some really good things regarding the face mask idea.
Yeah. So it is you said it's the $1 million question of the day. Can you talk us through more of the studies of face mask, not face mask? What do we know?
Yeah. So the line has always been, if you were in the general public, you don't need a face mask. The logic.
Judy, can you show us the chart I sent you?
Oh, yeah.
We have a thing. We're so excited that we have a chart. Yeah, look at that.
So Dana can explain that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the logic has been that we don't need masks because most of us are not super high risk just walking around outside. And again, viral particles are relatively heavy. They fall to the ground. So if you're not having like direct face-to-face communication with someone, your risk of getting infected just kind of walking around or even in the grocery store is pretty low. The other thing, again, we are incompetent. If you wear a mask, you're actually more likely to touch your face because you're adjusting it. You might like still stick your finger up underneath it. Like we're just not to be trusted. That being said, obviously a lot of countries in Asia do regularly wear masks. And as you can see from this very handy chart, it seems to be pretty effective in suppressing the infection. I think this graph is a little bit misleading. China is obviously still in the no mask zone, and they also wear masks a lot there, partially just because of the pollution, but also that was, one of the strategies they employed. Really the difference between South Korea and the US is testing. I mean, we had the first case in both those countries in the same day. Same thing with Singapore. I mean, they take your temperature before you go into the grocery store. They've done mass testing and virus tracing for everyone. So it's convenient to just say it's the mask. I think it's a lot more than that. But this is not to say that masks don't protect you. We know they protect us. This is why we're insisting that medical providers wear them all the time. If we had an infinite supply of masks, I would say, yeah, everyone should probably be wearing a mask. The problem is we don't. And we're just not as important right now as doctors and nurses and anybody else who works in the medical field. So in a perfect world, I think actually, yeah, the consensus would be we should probably wear a mask out in public. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough. And we really need to prioritize who gets them right now.
You talked a little bit about homebrew masks.
Yes. This is the other, scientists are amazing. In 2013, they did actually do a study of like, okay, say you don't have a mask. What else can you use? Here's the beautiful chart. Lost the beautiful chart.
Here in theory.
Here's the beautiful chart again. So surgical mask, as you can see, prevents 90% of particles coming through. A vacuum cleaner bag, very effective, 86%. Shockingly, a tea towel comes in third at blocking 72% of particles the size of a virus, which is about, I would say 0.05 microns, but don't hold me to that. Unfortunately, vacuum cleaner bags are kind of not the best like mouth face covering device. I still think that you could turn a tea towel into a mask pretty quickly, but the folks at Mother Jones are saying that a pillowcase and a cotton t-shirt, which blocks about half of the particles that size, which is obviously better than zero, are kind of your easiest, face mask surfaces or products.
I'm thinking that tea towel is a broad category that describes a lot of different fabrics.
That's a fair point. I mean, I would think that it would just be a cotton mix. I don't know what's special about a tea towel that makes it, gives the extra 2% boost over the standard cotton mix.
I think it has like a tourist destination on it, right? Like they'll have like Big Ben or something. Like that's maybe a British
That
flag.
like printing, it's actually like the, whatever they use to print on the fabric is providing that extra 2%.
It has to be from a tourist shop, I think, to qualify as a tea towel.
Preferably British, 100%. And there's
preferably British for sure.
Really boost it.
But that's pretty cool. I mean, I like the idea that 72% effective from like thing that we all would throw away anyway, like, your tourist tea towel. This is worth investigating.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing. And so I think that if you, really want to wear a mask out in public and you're super concerned about your risk, which to be honest, we probably all should be, wrap a tea towel around your head, pretend you're a Burning Man and just like get crazy with it.
What do you do when you go to the grocery store?
Because
I'm going to do whatever you're doing. And I'm going to tell my wife and kids and my parents the same thing.
My fiance is going to the grocery store for us because I've been working around the clock. So I have an errand runner that's going to the grocery store.
Smart.
Get one of those. I'll make a note of that. Yeah. Get one of those. I like it. My teenagers have failed in that department.
I was wondering about. Oh, actually, first of all, a friend of mine he's one of these wonderful people who's 3D printing. I think he's using that MIT model of like this giant face shield thing, but it occurs to me that's really designed for droplets, not for aerosol, right? Like it's
yeah, I mean, hypothetically it could still get up underneath. I don't know, I'm not an expert in PPE, so I don't know exactly what the how protective and what the benefit of the mask over the face mask is. I mean, I guess if you want to walk around with a plastic shield just like kind of holding it in front of you, or if you have like one of those crazy poker visors, you could probably like form that into a shield somehow. I mean, get creative. Everyone's got time.
We've got we're bringing different resources to bear here. We got this tennis machine is useful now, the tennis ball machine, the tea towel, the poker visor. Like, bring all your bric-a-brac people.
How about a Halloween mask?
Interesting question. I have a friend who we both bought these like giant inflatable dinosaur costumes, with the logic being that they're kind of like 6 feet apart and it has like an internal fan inside of it. So like we might bust those out and just go kind of romping around the neighborhood.
Hell yeah.
Get that on camera.
Just do that. That's a yes. That's a go. That system. That's it.
Dan, I have a question about what you described with South Korea, with their taking temperature as they walked into stores. That's only going to catch anyone that's at least mildly symptomatic and fevering, right? Yeah. So it's going to help because and if you're asymptomatic though, it's not.
It's true. You're 100% right. One thing I'm not going to say no because everything is changing very quickly with this virus. One thing we're pretty sure of is that you are infectious before you're symptomatic, but people who are carriers seem to be you're less infectious before you're symptomatic. Yeah, people who are carriers seem to be a little bit less infectious. So again, it's not a guarantee by any means, but certainly if there are people walking around who have a fever and maybe aren't entirely aware that they feel like a little bit crummy, but they're still going out anyway, like we would normally with a cold, it can at least get those people, from going and infecting other people. So
if people aren't coughing and sneezing, much safer to have in a crowd than people who are coughing and sneezing.
Right. You can still, you're still exhaling the viral particles. Right. So especially if you're, talking, breathing out heavily, there was like the singing anecdote where, everyone I think like 75% of people in a singing group got infected, but apparently singing, you exhale as many, it's either the speed or the rate of it, but it's essentially on par with coughing. So like there's something about like the vocal production that you are, still expelling huge amounts of viral particles from singing, more so than just regular talking. But yeah, so even just like what we're doing right now, like if I were sick, I would be just shedding virus all over you guys. So Thanks. Even if you're not coughing, it's not a guarantee. Well, fortunately it's all through a screen. So, everyone's safe here.
What do you envision? And I realize that there's no medical answer yet, and you talked about that, but how do you envision, when you think about what South Korea did, what can we do culturally over these next 4 to 6 weeks, and even beyond that, if we're ever going to kind of restart anything?
I think testing is really the key. You saw this even in Italy, that they had specific towns that tested everyone, almost everyone in the town, and they were able to immediately drop down, they didn't have the huge infection rates that other parts of the country did. Because you can kind of do source testing where, one person gets sick and then you test every single person who's had any contact with them. If they show any sign of the virus, they're immediately quarantined for 2 weeks. Again, even if they're not symptomatic.
Right.
And so that's really the way that these countries that have a grip on it have been able to maintain control, is just like really, really aggressive testing and then really strict quarantining of the people who test positive. And right now, we just don't have enough testing. And it's a problem that the US has obviously had for a long time. And we just don't have the capacity to do that. Even people who show up and are symptomatic, in some places are still being sent home, or it takes a week for them to get results back. And it's, we've just really, really dropped the ball on this one.
Do we have any idea how soon we will have a lot of tests?
Every week they say this week, and every week I talk to doctors who are still, I talked to the chief of emergency medicine at San Francisco General Hospital, and he said, we have the reagents, we have the capacity to test. The thing that we're missing is the swabs, just like essentially, glorified Q-tips. So they need to stick. No, they just don't have enough swabs.
And why is that, do you think? I've read different things as to why that is. Do we just lose the opportunity as a country to buy those raw materials because other countries grabbed them before us?
I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't been following the kind of supply chain snafus that have happened. I know, again, they're trying to get, companies that don't normally make these types of material to kind of step up and produce them. And I don't know how quickly that will happen. I don't know where the ball was dropped in terms of like the normal manufacturing process and why we just don't have enough of them. I couldn't tell you.
But to just extrapolate your earlier answer though, regarding testing, if indeed there was a way to have a 50-cent test where every family had an unlimited supply and did that every day, and obviously if you test positive, that person's quarantined, whatever, that would be a way forward, right? I realize it may be impossible to do, but that would be ultimately what might have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think knowledge is powerful in this, and we don't know enough. We don't know enough about who's infectious, who's not infectious, if you're asymptomatic or not. We can't catch it very early. Right now the best tool we have is essentially the social distancing or the shelter in place. California's been doing that longer than anyone, especially the Bay Area, and we haven't seen a surge. So it really is working. Like there is encouraging news coming that San Francisco has stayed pretty steady in the number of cases. Like it's gone up a little bit, but compared to what you're seeing in New York, it's nothing. And we were the first area to instill shelter in place, and it's actually working. So, in a perfect world, sure, we would have a lot of tests and you could kind of know who was safe to go out and who wasn't. Right now, 100% the best strategy we have is everyone just to stay the F home. And the good news is that is working. Even Washington is starting to see a decline in the number of cases. It seems like they've, kind of reached the apex and are coming down the other side. So hopefully this won't go on forever. China's going back to work. People are, going kind of back about their normal lives. It just takes a while. It takes longer than anybody wants it to, but it is the best strategy we have, especially right now when we don't have testing. So we don't know, necessarily who's infectious and who's not.
Then I just want to clarify, you are allowed to curse if you want to.
I wasn't sure about that. Yeah, I didn't know.
To quote,
I've really been holding it in, so thank you for clarifying.
To quote Udonis Haslem, a pretty well-known NBA player who wrote a brilliant piece. He's from Miami, and about all the spring breakers. I live in Clearwater, which was where a lot of those people were. My kids actually went to the beach. They're almost 19, but they didn't go where all that crowd was. They would never do that. They know where to go a mile north of it, and there's no one around. But Udonis wrote basically "Stay the fuck home," because all you guys came down to Miami, you leave, and his piece was more about a lot of the inner city kids who live in Miami who don't really have a big house to stay in. Like they're living in the streets in a sense, and you've just infected all them. You got to go back home to your nice home when your colleges send you home, and we're stuck here. And so he just kept writing "Stay the fuck home." I thought that was brilliant.
It's true. I mean, it's 100% true. And Miami's seeing a huge explosion in cases right now, and
yes.
It also goes to show, just because it's hot and humid somewhere, it doesn't mean the virus can't survive. So like the whole seasonality thing, like, yes, in theory, the virus, is more infectious and kind of stays around a little bit longer if it's cold and dry. But obviously it's still surviving and thriving in hot and humid places. So, it's definitely a problem. There was an amazing anecdote I saw of a guy whose the college-age son went to spring break, and his dad said, if you do that, don't come back here. I'm not letting you in the house. And sure enough, he wouldn't let the kid back in the house, and he came home. Just like, I don't know where the kid went, but dad would not let him in the house because the grandparents were there.
I literally said that to both my kids when they convinced me where they went. I said, that's great. I'm glad you were by yourself. But the next time you leave this home for that, you're sleeping outside, or go try to convince your aunt and uncle to take you. You can sleep by our pool. You ain't coming in the house. I was dead serious.
Yep.
I have to admit, I have we all, I think, spend a fair amount of time now imagining nightmare scenarios because that's just a fun new hobby. That's what we do. So I've been thinking like, okay, heaven forbid I get this thing, you have to figure, you're actually going to, where am I going to quarantine myself? Like maybe in this room? I don't know. But what I've settled on, I 100% want to convert. We have actually I bought it at Costco. We have a pretty big gazebo. And I was like, I'm going to just like make tarp walls for it. And I just want to be outside. It feels healthier and better and less like I'm like to get other people infected just to be outside. I want to do everything. I like to grocery shop outside. I'd like to, like in California, they have like the lockers are outside in LA, right? At the high school. Or I got an appeal from the hospital to give blood, and I would love to give blood, but I don't want to go in the hospital, right? Like I wish you had outside blood donation. Perhaps I'm taking this too far. Perhaps outside isn't the magical tonic I think it is, but it would be better, right? Like we'd have less of the same air and more sunlight and breeze, etc. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, one thing I do know is that the virus, it kind of would spread and infect in pockets. So like if one person in a family would get sick, most likely everyone in the family would get sick. And then it would start to spread because then you would have interaction with another family, and then that person would take it and infect their entire family.
But what are the studies on gazebos, Dana?
No studies on gazebos I've seen. That's an excellent question.
Well, Dana, didn't you write about the effects of kind of the home remedies, zinc and vitamin D? I'd love you to talk about that. I sent that to all my family too.
Yeah. So a caveat is I'm a vitamin skeptic. So I'm just going to be clear with my, stance on this. I've received more angry comments on that article than anything else I've ever written. People are very passionate about their vitamins. And God forbid you tell them they might not work. So I did go into that thinking nothing is going to work. Vitamins are totally useless. It's a total scam. I still believe most of the vitamin industry is a scam, but there is the logic is that if you are vitamin deficient, then taking a supplement is helpful. Right. Most of us in the US have enough nutrition that we're not vitamin deficient. The one exception might be vitamin D because that mostly comes through sunlight. And especially with everyone quarantined inside, this is another argument for your gazebo. Get outside, get your vitamin D, because it does play a pretty crucial role in the immune function. And right now, the best defense you have is your immune system and just not being gross and touching your face. And so if you are deficient in vitamin D and if you take a supplement, there was a big British Medical Journal study that said, yes, this will actually kind of boost your immunity and it does something good for you. So I've walked back my stance on vitamin D. If you know you're deficient or you think you are, knock yourself out and take a vitamin D supplement. It might help you. Zinc does not have any protective effects. It's super unclear still whether it does anything. If you have a cold, there's some research that it says that it can shorten the duration of a cold by about a day. About a third of colds are caused by coronaviruses, which is obviously the family of what we're dealing with now. It's not the same virus. But the research is showing that like if you take a zinc supplement, it might shorten the duration of a cold by about a day. If a third of those colds are caused by coronaviruses, then yes, there is some logic that maybe zinc does kind of work as an antiviral against a coronavirus. It has not been tested on this coronavirus specifically. It does not protect you from getting the virus. And there's other studies that show it does absolutely nothing. So again, the zinc research is not 100%, but at this point, I can say it's a waste of money, but it's not going to hurt you if you take a daily, vitamin D and zinc supplement. It's kind of up to you. But like, it's not an excuse to not do these other things. It doesn't mean you can then go out in public and just touch every surface and have face-to-face meetings and just start making out with everybody. Like it's not going to protect you in those circumstances. So do all the things you would do anyway of washing your hands, don't touch your face, don't go outside. Yeah.
And put on your dinosaur costume. Was that? I didn't hear you say that.
I have not written about the dinosaur costume. I probably should have mentioned that. This is not a tested and verified hazmat suit, but it feels that way. So,
It's the only thing I'm going to remember a year from now is that we had a noted science writer on the show who said to get basically get inside a Toronto Raptors mascot.
Well, no, I think the question on everyone's mind, Dan, is exactly what kind of dinosaur do you fancy yourself to be?
Right, that's a fair question. So I went with a T-Rex. I was initially really drawn by the Triceratops because it has a really long tail and head. So you're guaranteed that 6 feet of social distancing in any direction. It's kind of like a bubble that's wrapped around you.
Yeah.
But that one was twice as expensive on Amazon, so I went for the T-Rex costume.
Is it handy?
It is.
Oh, you want to see it? Wait, what did your friend get? Didn't you say your friend got one too?
Yeah, my friend, oh God, what she got the pterodactyl.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, she went for the pterodactyl. There's also a velociraptor costume as well, if you would like to join in our club.
I can see, at the gym that we go to, they have those, like the bubbles that you get in with your head sticking out so you can bounce off each other. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
But the point is, as soon as you put one on, everybody just wants to whack into each other. And I feel like there might be a little bit of that compulsion with the dinosaur costume.
That's a fair point. I mean, it's just like, again, the mask, you just want to touch your face because it's there. Yeah, you might draw more unwanted attention with the dinosaur costume. That's a fair point. I think my rationale is that your face is completely covered.
Yeah.
And it's got this like ventilation fan inside of it that so presumably you're not breathing the same air as everybody else near you. So I think it does. My very scientific rationale is that this is like a hazmat suit and we'll be totally fine running around. This is not medical advice. Please, no one else listen to me or do what I'm doing.
Are you, what's your exercise game these days?
So I have a dog who's blissfully sleeping on the couch behind me. So she's a great excuse to go outside. Like you can still go outside and go for a walk, go for a run. So I take her out every day. And then I'm used to working from home. So I've already got all the home gym equipment. Like I've already got free weights and a yoga mat and, exercise bands and stuff. So I'm doing just kind of like, a routine or a, free workout video a day, and then taking her out for some fresh air. So it's, it's better than nothing.
That's right in the Christy Oshwindon recommended lane of like not training for your marathon right now, but doing enough that you feel
don't do nothing, but don't do too much of something.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, Chrissy's amazing, and she's spot on in her article that like if you do too much, it really can kind of harm your immune system, and especially if you feel sick at all, don't do anything. It's not worth it. Just take the day off or several days off because it really can. It stresses your body and it stresses your immune system. It creates a little bit more inflammation, and then the virus can just kind of take off and thrive, and it's just not worth it. But a little bit of exercise is great, and it does boost your immunity. So 100%.
And what do we do with the, it's seasonal allergy time. Everybody's hunting their own body for symptoms anyway. So you start to feel some stuff, like some sniffles, some sore throat, maybe a hint of a fever, maybe not. I don't know. How do we think through these moments now?
Honestly, the advice is going to be the same whether you have the virus or not, which is just stay home. There's nothing we can do for you. And, certainly you do not want to go to the ER. You don't want to go to your doctor right now, because if it is the virus, you can infect other people. And right now they just have to save capacity for beds and medications and, whatever resources they have for the most severe cases. So if you're feeling a little bit crummy, stay home, don't exercise, just take the day off, do whatever you need to do to feel better. If you have a fever, you can take Tylenol or ibuprofen. People have gotten mad at me about this too, but there does not seem to be any evidence that ibuprofen is making an infection worse. It doesn't dampen your immune system. Every researcher and doctor I spoke to in the US is like, we don't know where this advice came from. It's not really backed up. If you have a fever, you can take either Tylenol or ibuprofen to kind of bring your fever down and just feel better.
I think that rumor came from Tylenol.
Did it really? I like am now very curious.
It makes a lot of sense because I listen to smart people like you, and clearly you talk to a lot of knowledgeable people who have said there's nothing wrong with ibuprofen.
It's not, yeah. I mean, there's like one line that's not sourced in a Lancet article that says, oh, maybe it increases ACE2 receptors, but we don't know already if increasing ACE2 receptors makes the virus worse. They're still trying to figure this out. So if you're on, ACE inhibitor medication for your heart, don't stop taking it. And there's no sourcing in that article of where that line came from. Again, no one in the US, no one that I spoke to, thinks that it is a real risk. So yeah, if you're feeling sick, take those kind of whatever your preferred, over the counter or even vitamin supplement, protocol that you have, and just stay home.
She laughed a little when she said vitamin supplement, did you kept saying?
Hey, Henry, can I ask one more question before you bring in Gerard? So Dana, when this first started happening and the NBA shut down, Henry tweeted out right away, what can we learn from this? And it's something I thought about every day as we go through these what's going on in the news. So what can we learn from this from your perspective with regard to what you just said about no matter whether it's this virus or whatever, if you don't feel well, stay home. Like if that ends up being something that all not just Americans, but everyone in the world starts doing, you don't feel great, just stay home. And employers need to allow that to happen. How much healthier would everyone be long term?
Oh God, I've been looking a lot for a silver lining in all this, not in like a Pollyanna way, but just like we can't have had this much shit happen and not have something, not have learned something from it. And I think you're spot on. I think that employers need to have, better sick leave. I think everyone needs to have universal sick leave. I think we need better healthcare, as obvious. Like we've really messed this up as a country. And I think that this is another reason that we're doing really poorly. Not everyone has health insurance. There's a culture that you still go to work when you're sick. A lot of people don't get sick leave. And it's screwed us. So, I think that that's a huge takeaway that I'm going to get on my little soap bubble now, but healthcare is a universal right. Sick leave is a universal right. Childcare is a universal right. We need all these things to be a healthy, functioning society and to not have this massive shutdown like we are now and just be brought to our knees. And there's an economic argument for it as well. I'm way out of my lane now as a science journalist, but
I'm fine with it. Yeah.
We're all on board here.
I've been thinking though, to be honest, if somebody, I'm again, now I'm going to go on to something I don't know anything about, which is DC politics, but if somebody introduced universal healthcare on the floor right now, and others were forced to argue against it at this time, I just feel like no one wants to do that right now, right? It's a popular issue without a pandemic. Anyway, it just struck me as go now. Now's the time to make the case for universal healthcare, right?
Well, right, and we're seeing the economic, for everyone who's saying, oh, we should just open back up because the recession is going to be a larger harm than the virus actually is. Well, it's all right, great. Then what about the cost of universal healthcare versus having to go through this again in however many years? Same thing with funding for the NIH and the CDC, and blocking the $2 billion to create more respirators and masks that Trump blocked. There's a financial value in investing in healthcare and scientific research and the medical system, because when it fails, you see such an enormous cost and, it's a crippling of the economy and of the country. So again, I'm out of my lane here, but I think there's a real argument that, invest in this, put resources towards it because, when something like this happens, it's all we have.
But just to finish, I don't want this to get past people. The whole Henry and I have this own personal vendetta against machismo. Neither of us are very macho guys, I would say, and very happy to say that about me and my friend Henry. It's not smart. It's not macho. It's not anything good to go to work when you're not feeling good, especially if you've got things like a coughing or sneezing, whatever. If you care about people, if you don't care about people, go to work, right? Yeah. If you're an employer that challenges that mentality, that toughness, and I'm a coach, I know what that means. Hey, if you can tough it through, no, you just hate people if you do that. Stay home means you love people. It's simple as that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a selfish act to go to work when you're sick and you feel like you're helping out the company and no one wants to let their team down. But if you can work from home, or if you're really sick, don't go in because it is, it can infect other people and then, we're in the situation that we're in now. So yeah, don't be macho. Just stay home.
Hashtag don't be macho.
And I'm totally aware of this research on hand washing too. Like it's men.
Yeah. When we were ripping the species, we were talking about the males of the species. Yeah.
Sorry, we made the coronavirus epidemic, everybody.
Actually, this is so true. So the coronavirus disproportionately affects men. It's like a 60-40 split in terms of like who is infected, who's dying.
I know why.
It was all like because of smokers in China, but turns out it's the same for little kids also. Even among kids under the age of 18, it's still a split where males are more infected than females are. So maybe the little boys aren't washing their hands. I don't know, or maybe there is.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
That's a fact. Known fact.
I have a son, yes, and I was a boy young once.
I go to 100%. Public restrooms. I grew up in a family where we were super anal about washing hands. And my dad would a little bit like, look at that guy. He's not washing his hands. Judy and I had this conversation early in this pandemic, and I was like, in the women's restroom, what percentage of people just don't wash their hands? And she's like, well, I don't know, because she's like, well, if I'm there, then I don't know what they do. I'm not there. I'm like, oh, no. I'm talking about like in the men's room. I am there. And it's 50%. Just walk right out of the stall out into, like, that's just how it goes. My whole life. It's just.
You guys are gross.
We did this. Right. Yeah.
Seinfeld did a show about this.
Yes.
Very, very popular show. Yeah. With Poppy, the pizza cook. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're overtime already, but we do have a tradition, Dana, of Gerard has been on video asking a question every single time from his apartment in New York where he's selling Mercedes. There he is.
What's up, guys?
See the logo?
Dana, thanks for joining us. This was cool.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hope some of it was helpful. I don't know.
Extremely helpful. I'm curious about the mutation of the virus, right? Like, it seems like things are changing day by day or minute by minute. I mean, there's so much about the mutation that we don't know, right? And sort of what the future of that means. Could this get worse? I always think about, at first when it was first happening, like in China, I was like, okay, we're not quite at like the movie Outbreak level yet. But now I'm like, well, we're getting dangerously closer to Outbreak. So is that a result of mutations? And is this, essentially, is the worst still coming?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
An upbeat one, I would add.
Very upbeat. Very.
Sorry,
the virus is mutating, but it's mutating a little bit. So we do know there are a couple. I don't want to say strains because it makes it sound like there's like entirely different viruses. The virus is mutating a little bit. There's been papers about this. This is just what viruses do. But it's not mutating enough that it's an entirely different strain. So right now, presumably, if you get essentially, if you got infected once, could you get reinfected by the virus? It does not look like the case right now. We don't know how long that will be true. We just don't know enough about it. It's mutating a little bit. It's not mutating enough that it's an entirely new strain of virus. Stay tuned. That's not a very helpful, happy answer.
No, but it's I'd rather deal in realities than false hope.
Yeah. It's not like a flu situation right now where it's like an entirely new strain every year. That's kind of all we can go, but it is mutating a little bit. Yeah.
And I'm thinking odds are we've had hotspots probably in the US well before they were quote of known hotspots, right? Like, I had a friend who was severely sick right after the Super Bowl, and she is convinced now that she had corona then. Like, she was like, that's what it was, 100%.
It's definitely possible. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that there is a really bad flu going around this year. There's been 80,000 people have died from the flu. And so I have known a lot of people who've gotten super sick. And even, recently were convinced it was coronavirus, had all the symptoms, and they actually were able to get tested and it was negative and they were positive for the flu. So I think you're probably right. Like, I think this has been around and there have been hotspots a lot longer than we've known. But I also know it's a bad flu season, and a lot of those symptoms, fever, cough, things like that can be similar between the two. So it's not a guarantee. It's a yes and. It's like, yes, we have coronavirus and we have a terrible flu this year.
Right.
Jackpot.
Oh, Dana, I've been dying to ask somebody this, and I'm so thankful that I thought of it before we say goodbye. Will we ever know? So his friend, will she ever get a test and be like, oh, it was, right? Looking back?
Yeah, so they are working on developing antibody tests. And this goes back to your, plasma question from the beginning. So it's been in the works for a while. I think Singapore had a version early on. I think we're getting closer and closer to an antibody test that we can kind of roll out, and that will tell you if you ever had the virus. So I don't know, again, given the testing situation, how widely they'll ever roll that out, but I can imagine that at some point we can know, you can get tested to see whether you have antibodies for the novel coronavirus or not. And eventually you should be able to know when that will happen. I'm not entirely sure. Another super interesting thing that I'm writing about right now is they're starting to look at essentially doing DNA testing of people who've had the virus. You've had a known positive case, they can sequence your DNA and look for differences in your genome based on essentially your immune function. So if you have, because it's really interesting, where like some people have, no symptoms or kind of mild cold symptoms. Some people obviously super, super severe infection. Maybe there's something different in your DNA that's dictating, how well your immune system responds to the virus. So there's like super interesting research happening. I think part of that will also have to lean on antibody tests to make sure, that someone really did have the virus before they then throw them into the study. So yeah, there's stuff happening. Scientists are working really hard. Science is just pretty slow, and the virus is not. So.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any other questions before we go?
Yes, I think everyone's wondering, is it healthy to allow your puppy to just drink vodka in the morning so it's very calm the rest of the day? I've never seen anything like it before.
That's not.
That is not the direction I thought you were going to go in with the dog.
Or did you run it? Randy asked earlier, did you run it for 15 miles? That dog has been amazing.
That's a good dog.
She is just a super lazy dog. She went out for like a short walk before I hopped on the call with you guys, and that's enough. She'll perk up later in the day. She got up a second ago and right back down. Yeah, she's not dead.
That's why I speculated about the vodka.
She's just chill.
That's great. I'm really hoping that in a way that you find like not embarrassing, you could like share with us a photo of the dinosaur costume, like maybe email it or something, whatever feels right. And I know you're gonna want to put caveats with it and a whole explanation, but I'd hate to go months without seeing it. I just feel like
when we go on our rampage through the streets, I will take it.
Love that.
Do you have rollerblades?
No, but I really wish I did now. I thought about that factor in it, and that would really up the ante.
A rollerblading dinosaur.
Yeah, so great.
A pterodactyl rollerblading. That'd be
so great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Gerard. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dana, so much. And we'll be here every day this week at 11 a.m. All right.
Thank you guys. It's fun.